Well, we're here at Trenton Elementary School. Chris Popper joined by Dr. Marc Gousse and Mike Zboray, the principal of Trenton Elementary School. And it's great to be inside Trenton. There are some, as there are every year during budget deliberations, people have lots of questions, and the school budget always seems to be a topic of concern. This year, especially in Trenton, if I understand some of the events leading up to this, and full disclosure, my wife is a special education teacher in Newport, so I don't have a dog in this fight, but I understand everything or a lot of things that go involved with special education. The Trenton community, there are newer students coming into the district, and that is causing increased costs in special education.
Right. We plan our budgets based upon what we know to be our student population and needs, and from time to time, and this is true of all communities across the AOS state and country, that students come and go and they transition. We have a couple of students this year. We had unanticipated costs associated, unanticipated mandated costs associated. So that's the delta we're trying to navigate both within this year and next year.
And in terms of special education, based upon the individual education plan, an IEP, there could be requirements such as having a one-on-one aide. There could be requirements for out of district placement. Correct. Because the district could not properly educate the child based upon whether it's their physical, emotional, or other disabilities.
Right. I think a couple of distinctions, and you laid it out really well. It's not like a teacher or a parent or an administrator just says this child needs support. It's a team of individuals come together using assessments, data, testing, including the parents, including the staff, including administration, and that team looks at information. They make a recommendation, and then that is reviewed, and then if it's determined that the recommendation merits the child having a plan, then that plan is put into place, and then we go down the road where we implement the plan and or the funding.
And those plans are fluid.
Yep.
Knowing my wife is a special education teacher, anybody can call a meeting and review the plan at any time.
Right. But it doesn't mean that when somebody asks for a meeting or it's reviewed, that funding is automatically attached. It's important that people know that the special education director, the principal, there are many people that come together to review the information and make the decision. The other piece is we work really hard, and it's our legal responsibility to educate the child in the least restrictive environment and hopefully mainstreamed in the regular classroom. That's the goal. That's what we work towards. But from time to time, students require various needs and supports. Oftentimes, it can just be additional time. It can be more supports from the classroom teacher, but sometimes it does require elevated services, up to and including what can be a real game changer, and that is the school not being able to meet that child's education needs, which could lead to, because we may not have the resources, an out-of-district placement. And an out-of-district placement can be upwards of $100,000 for one student in 1 year. And
when you look upon that, I mean, case in point, if you read the Bangor Daily News this past weekend, they were talking about the multi-district school that was in Old Town, now in Bangor, and the challenges that they're facing.
Right.
If someone moves into a community, the community has to accept them. I mean,
it's not right. I mean, we have a responsibility as a public school system to educate all children. We in a very value neutral way, and Mike and his staff have done that in a very above board and commendable way. But the dynamic that we are faced with, and many communities are, is how do we do what's legally and morally correct for the student? How do we do the right thing while also meeting our fiduciary responsibility to the community?
Right. And I guess fuller disclosure, my son has cerebral palsy, did receive aid through Bangor and through a principal's agreement, went to Newport, RSU 19, and I mean, received a host of services from physical to occupational therapy. And listen, he's now a graduate of University of South Dakota Law School,
Awesome.
Working for a judge. So, I mean, these assistants really can pay off.
Absolutely.
And, you know,
and save money down the road through that support early on.
Right.
And I think that's really important about the support of saving money down the road, and that kind of puts me in the direction of, you know, our pre-K and Trenton starting a pre-K last year and really working hard, recognizing that if we are able to catch students early enough within our community, it's pretty clear through studies and through the experience of pre-Ks and other schools that that is a game changer in terms of what you have to do later on in terms of special education if students require speech services or they need a little OT or PT in terms of their ability for writing or their stamina to just sit up. And if you're able to make those investments early, then you're saving a lot of money later on. And I think that's a really important part of what we're trying to do here.
And, you know, I know that, I mean, child development services, which my son took advantage of, a lot of their funding has been cut back, and I don't know if, you know, how active CDS is in communities anymore, and that's why it's so important to have those pre-K services.
Yeah, it is important, Chris, and you know, one of the and I want to be careful here politically. Just an observation that if you look at services to communities, both whether they be federal or state or resources, it's an observation on our part that the erosion or the retrograding of the support financially and resources has really cascaded by default into the public schools, not just here in Trenton, not through the AOS, across Hancock County, across the state, and across the nation.
So I know that you've tried to make some accommodations towards the budget.
Yep. You've
gone out, you've secured a loan at a very friendly interest rate.
Well, we'll back up a little bit. We have a couple of things that are going to position us at town meeting, hopefully that will help minimize the impact of our request. Full disclosure, we do receive some funds to support special education, but it's not all.
It doesn't cover the 100%.
Correct. And full disclosure, the percent increase has gone from 43% to 45%.
And that's special ed only.
Correct. We're not a big receiver in Trenton or in the AOS of state funds. Within that, yes, these unanticipated costs have spiked our budget request this year. Overall, Michael has done an amazing job with the budget. So it's not like we have all these add-ons or things that we're asking for.
You're not adding a third floor to
No third floor to the building.
No. We've navigated our responsibility, our collective bargaining agreement, as we should with our employees. They do an amazing job, so we've navigated that piece. We're making inroads with healthcare, thanks to the work with our staff and getting a handle on healthcare costs. I'm proud of that. But some of these costs are beyond our control, and I understand it hits taxpayers hard. But in the end, what we're faced with is really, it's really come about for two reasons. One, the unanticipated costs, and two, each year in our budget, funds that are not expended goes towards carry forward. We've made recommendations over the last few years. Michael, Nancy Thurlow, our business manager for nearly 40 years, myself, the school board, on the carry forward that we recommended that be spent down judiciously, so not as to spike the budget. I mean, ideally you want a budget that slopes gently.
Right.
You don't want spikes up and down. And because against our recommendation, the carry forward has been spent down aggressively, we're at a cliff. That money isn't there to offset the ask. And so that spikes the request. That's one piece, as well as the unanticipated costs. And I want the community to know that it's important to us that we continue to work with the select board and all citizens, because we all want the same thing. We want great schools, we want to support our kids, but we want to support our communities. And I think we're at a crossroads here in Trenton with that.
It's tough because property taxes, I mean, you know, how do you fund the budget? It's property taxes. And that's the way that the government has it set up.
It becomes particularly unique here in Trenton. People may or may not know. It's a great community, but the corridor that we pass through, you know, the funds that we ask for and the resources that we receive, which we very much appreciate, it's finite. There are entities here in Trenton that people may not know that are not required or produce tax revenues. The Bar Harbor Airport being one.
Right.
The Down East Transportation being two. Those are two significant parcels of land. And again, they are tax exempt. But I want to point that out is that there are, so what are the options? It's land, property values, and that's hard when you don't have that offset.
It's brutal.
Yes.
I mean, it's brutal because you have people that have lived here the majority of their lives that necessarily may not have students attending Trenton Elementary School or MDI High School, and as a result, they're like, my taxes are going up dramatically, and I'm not seeing any benefit of it.
Well, maybe Mike could talk about a few of the benefits, the good work that's being done by the staff and the school in terms of how his school is performing and the bang for the buck, if you will.
I think for the most part, in terms of the Trenton School, our students are doing really well, consistently on the MEA scoring above the state average, and that number has been going up in both ELA, so reading and writing, and in math. One of the other measures that we use that I think is a little bit more consistent than the MEA, because that test has changed over the years, and it's hard, it's kind of apples and oranges trying to compare test to test. But when we take our NWEAs, which we have been doing for a number of years here, in all categories, an NWEA is an online assessment that's taken by students across the district, and it adjusts to their instructional level as they're taking the test. So let's say, for example, you start getting questions in your math test that are, you start getting them right, and they get a little bit harder because it's trying to assess where you are instructionally rather than just your achievement level.
Okay. And that's all kids, right, Mike?
And that's all kids.
In all subgroups.
Yep, in all subgroups. And we have noticed that our students are progressively getting better and better every year, and that's a better assessment for us to get a sense in the aggregate for the whole of what that looks like. We also do a variety of things. Well, just today was our Earth Day, Arbor Day, where folks from the community come and help out, and we try to clean our trails because our trails are open to the public here at the school, our playground because parents use that during weekends, and so we were out there today with kids doing that. So a whole variety of things that take place here that benefit the community. One of the great things about this school, when I came here from Connors Emerson 5 years ago, is that this school has a vibrant after-school program. Not a lot of schools have an after-school program that started with some funding from the state, but then the school had to pick that up. And for parents to have a program where they can leave their kids in a safe environment between 3 and 5 o'clock, what a boon that is. It's a game changer for a lot of parents. And so when you think of the services that we provide and the amount of money that costs the school to do, which is probably less than what they would have to do on their own, that allows those parents within this community to work a little bit longer and feel that, their kids are cared for. So, there's a lot that happens in this little school that helps out the town and provides a really good education for the kids.
I wanted to point out, in addition to that, Mike is the first school in the AOS and our school district that has gone forward and implemented pre-K very successfully, I might add. So we're very proud of that. But I did want to come back to your question about the loan.
Yeah.
So there's two pieces that we've worked hard on to try to bring the budget. First of all, it's important for people to know the budget process starts back in the fall. We've been working on this for almost a year, as we do every year. And the school committee has worked really hard and collaboratively with the municipal officers to try to bring the budget in as a reasonable request. When I say that, we started out, our initial request, we were over 20%. Which is just in the stratosphere. Yeah. We whittled that down to about 15%, but still, that still is way beyond the scope of even anything that we would ask for support for. We got to a place through a combination of things where we're at about, 8%, Mike?
About 8.6, I believe.
Which I would say still raises eyebrows. We don't take that lightly, but how did we get there? Through a combination of good fortune and the state coming forward and said, hey, saw where you're having some challenges in your school district. You may be eligible for some hardship money. We're like, wow. They're reaching out to us and telling us. So we researched it. Mike did a great job working with Nancy Thurlow. We sent in our application, and we were awarded an additional $117,000 in hardship money, which will be applied.
A grant or
No, it's one-time money that it just says, you guys, because through a combination, no fault of your own, you're eligible for these funds. And those will be received and can be applied immediately. And that we do not have to pay them back.
Okay, and that's important, and that's very similar to, for example, when Millinocket had the mill closed.
Yes.
And the property values went where their assessed value went way down, but because of the timing, things don't get adjusted right away. So that's where that kind of money came. So that's very similar.
Right.
If you're listening,
but it's,
to something like that.
But it's important. It's one-time money, and it's money that we do not have to pay back. Additionally, through the wisdom of elected officials, former Superintendent Rob Lebo, and others, there was a AOS reserve. I should say AOS is our district, Alternative Organizational Structure, AOS 91.
As opposed to an RSU.
Right. We're a collection of school boards. I actually report to 11 different boards with 10 different budgets. The AOS established a reserve fund right now, and each member community contributes to that fund to the point where it can grow to approximately $750,000. That money is in a special account. It's protected. The purpose of that money is exactly for situations like this, is that if a member school exhausts all of their resources and they have no other options available, they can request access to the fund, a loan, if you will.
Right.
It's through member schools only in the AOS of up to $75,000 per event. And that money has to be paid back starting the second year of the request at 15%, 20% per year to pay back. And in this case,
at like a 3%.
A nominal interest rate, and the interest rate is determined by the secretary of the AOS, myself, based upon what the fund accrued for value the previous year.
Okay.
What the fund accrued for previous value the previous year was 0.4%. So 0.4% is what I would assign if the...
It's basically a no interest
It's
loan.
$300.
$300.
So when you say applied, what we've done is we've recommended to the school committee has supported that, and now that goes before the voters. So why the budget is at the place it is, from the 20 to the 15 to the 8.6, is because of the additional state money and the request to use the AOS reserve fund, which does have to be paid back. If that happens, the voters approve it, they have to approve it, then we'll be in a
Because it's
position.
a liability
Right.
from the town
Right.
to the AOS.
The bigger question for me, Chris, and I think for Mike is, okay, hopefully the community will see that we've done everything we can and that will be supported. But what's next? What's down the road? And we really, in my opinion, need to be working across the aisle, both with our municipal officers, select boards, town councils, throughout the AOS, regionally and beyond, because these costs are going to continue to be there for all member communities. It was Southwest a few years ago, it's Trenton today, it'll be another one tomorrow. If you look at the Rockland school system right down the road, their special ed budget is up over $1 million this year alone in just that cost center for this year for that very reason. I spoke to all of the Hancock County superintendents last Friday. We're all seeing the impact of this across our region. And I also spoke to former Superintendent Lebo, who indicated to me, and this is public information, his special education costs in the district he's in Massachusetts, just out of district placements for this year, are over $1.5 million. So we need, this is way bigger than Trenton. We need to work together. We'll be reaching out to congressional delegates to ask them to review this and see what help communities can receive back home to support these mandated programs, which are the right thing to do for children's, but do not fund to the level they're mandated,
Right. Yep.
and working with our state officials as well.
Next step, you have this coming Wednesday, a community forum.
Yes. And at that community forum, we spend a little time sort of going through the history of Trenton and sort of, who we are as a school, talking about our population, which for many towns along the coast of Maine have shrunk over the years. Here in Trenton, we have seen a slow increase over the last 10 years. So we talk a little bit about where we are and what the implication of adding a pre-K and what that does to our numbers. We talk a little bit about our population, and Trenton is a transient community. We have a lot of people that come and go, and we have a lot of people without a lot of means, and so our free and reduced population is up around 55% just about every year. We're one of the highest in the districts and comparable to some of those other smaller towns around Hancock County. And then we sort of go into, well, how many teachers have we had over those years? And just trying to give a sense of the overall picture where even though our student population is increasing, our teachers' numbers aren't spiking. They're comparable across that 10 years in terms of ed tech support, because when you talk about special education, oftentimes you're hiring some ed techs to help implement those programmings that happen at those meetings. And even those numbers over the last 10 years are, we're doing a really good job taking care of our kids, but not at the expense of taxpayers.
And in terms of ed techs, I mean, those are mandated by those individual education plans,
Yes.
IEPs.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that if someone needs assistance for 1 or 2 periods a day, then you then transition that ed tech to another student.
Yep.
And I mean, I know that it's a whole. I mean, my wife is a special ed department head in Newport. I mean, they sit there and it's like a jigsaw puzzle. How do we match this child's needs with the ed tech,
Right.
and who's going to then cover? And I mean, it's a whole deck of cards that really needs to be shuffled.
I think to that point, Chris, Mike, his staff, and I think this is true of all public, all of our employees, they do the very best they can to minimize the impact economically and use the resources the most effectively. With that too, I just have to give a pat on the back to Mike in terms of how he's managed his budget. There are certain requirements that we have contractually with our teachers for coursework and other pieces. Mike and his staff have worked together to try to minimize those impacts and plan thoughtfully. There isn't a whole lot of fluff here in terms or extras. I don't like to use the term bare bones, but Mike has really whittled it down to do what is the educationally, fundamentally most important programming for all children without disregard for the impact to the local taxpayer.
Okay. So Wednesday the 15th, there's a community forum.
Yep.
Then
5 o'clock,
5 o'clock.
childcare provided.
Here in the library.
Okay. And then the town meeting is when?
It is next Tuesday,
So it would be the
21st. Yep.
Okay.
And it's here at the school in the gym. And before that, the 8th grade does a spaghetti supper to raise money for their class trip and the gift that they give the school after their promotion from Trenton. So it's a good opportunity for neighbors to come and have dinner together and then go to town meeting. And we've been doing that for years here in Trenton.
As people get ready to vote at town meeting, I'm sure you would welcome their questions, both of you.
Yes.
Absolutely, and ideally, if they know their question in advance, we can give them better answers if we research it, but the short answer is yes. And I'd also add, going into this process, obviously our job is to advocate for the children in the schools, and we recognize that elected officials, select board, they have to be consciously aware of the impact to the community and the resources that they have to disseminate for public safety, for roads, all of those pieces, and we recognize that. We want to work collaboratively with them moving forward so that we can address this in a way that won't hurt students, won't hurt the schools, but is also embracing and supportive of the entire community.
Okay. Anything that I missed or anything you want to add?
No, the other thing about, in terms of the voting for the town, the day before, on Monday, there is the vote for town officials.
Okay.
So people would go to the town office to vote for selectmen and school board members, and there's other warrants on that.
I would like to point out, too, that the budget that is published in the town report is not the budget that we're proposing. And that's not to suggest that anybody did anything that's inaccurate. The school committee passed a revised budget after that was submitted. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
So what's in the report was what we had proposed at the time of the deadline.
Yeah.
But what we're presenting for the public's approval is different. So I encourage people to really look closely at that information and ask a lot of questions.
Okay. And clearly, as you've worked your way down through the budget, it necessarily changed as you've tried to whittle away at it.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Voters have a lot to decide
Yes.
on, but educate yourselves. And, having been on the Bangor City Council, I just remember what I was. I mean, that is the hardest vote that you will make.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm not immune or blind to that either.
Right.
As none of us, I served as a city councilor for 2 terms in another municipality, so I understand that side. My mother is 93 years old, living on a fixed income, so
Right.
I'm not immune to that, and
everybody
just
gets
saying,
it.
here we go for the school.
Right.
We've got to work together.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thanks for watching. Check out all the other videos we have on the WDEA YouTube channel.